Hey, welcome back. Okay, so obviously in the last part we've kind of named everything so we know what it is. Now what we're going to do is affect pivot points and basically start setting it all up the way it needs to be. Now if we look, these fellows here, they have their pivot points actually in the right place. Okay, we want them central to these bones at the top. We don't want them to pivot from one edge at the back or front. We want them to pivot from here. Now let's have a look at these. These ones do not have pivots in the right place. So what I'm going to do is move to local. Okay, so there we are, local. That's gimbal. I said local. And in local I'm going to start messing around with our pivot points. So I picked pivot only. Now you may notice at the minute that this pivot here isn't actually set up in the right direction or anything. Neither is this one. Or this one, or this one, or this one. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit of effort. Fortunately though, we can base a lot of the pivots on previous ones once we get the first one set up. So, what I'm going to do is just start moving this around. Until I get it where I want it. Change this to local. There we go. Makes things a little bit easier. Okay, so now that is leading off there, which is where it should be. Now this one's pivot. We want to be kind of aligned to this one, so what we can do is just click the align tool. Okay, and now we can align on the pivot point like that, and align its orientation at the same time. See? We can also change it to current object or any number of other things. See? Very useful. So now what I can do is just bring this back and kind of into the right direction there. There we go. See? Now, this one again, same as before, it's kind of got twisted around, so we'll just save it by doing this. And here. Now, orthographic is sometimes a bit more of a help when you're doing this because you get that kind of flat-on view. So I'm doing this kind of quickly. You just want to take your time. The reason it's like this is because I had to reset all my X forms after I'd done the scaling and stuff, and that always absolutely ruins the pivots. Absolutely ruins them. And if I centered them to object, here we go. Because you can see that the actual boxes on these aren't, unfortunately, pointing in the right direction anymore. The bounding boxes have changed. Which is a pain, but there you go. If I align them to the object, you can see that the alignment of this bounding box is over there, yeah? So, what I need to do is just mess around with my pivot point and get it pointing in the right direction. Like that. Now these ones are about right, you see. And that one now is about right. It's in the middle, which isn't really too useful, but there we go. Now it isn't. You see, we don't want them, like I said, at the very bottom here. That's no use to us. So let's affect all 5 of these pivots at once and just center them. And now I can move them. There we go. And again here. Remember, I'm doing this very roughly. And all I'm doing for hotkeys is I'm just using the QWER of QWERTY just to nip between the move and the rotate tools and stuff. And then over to here. Okay, and that fixes those pivots there. Now let's have a look at these ones. You see the toe here, we need to move that one. So, affect pivot only. Just going to zoom in on my toe here. I'm just going to try and view it from the top. There we go. Swing this around. And then just put it in the middle there. Like I say, you're going to get plenty more time than I have to get this part right. Now, bring this up a little bit for the pivot, because we don't want our toe to bend from the bottom. If I just grab this, it's much better if it bends from here. Okay, now here where this one is, we want this to bend from the middle point here. And let's just change its orientation so it's following the flow of the foot. Now this one, again following the flow like that. And let's move it up to where the knee would be. And then this one, to round about where the middle of the thigh would be, because it's going to move from here, you know, wedging its way back and forth, kind of pumping along as it were. Okay, now this will move from here because it can rock back and forth, that means. This one's in the right place, this one's in the right place, this one's nearly in the right place, that one's in the right place because obviously we mirrored the other ones. So we just need to do some minor modifications to these. Okay, we need to do some quite extensive modifications to these actually. Those ones are right, these ones are not right. Just change the angle and then the position. That's better. Remember, I don't have angle snap on, I'm just doing this by eye. Oops, wrong one. Now then this one, ooh. Let's have a look. Not in a happy place, is it? However, it's not impossible to fix. And then this one, again in that unhappy little place. Let's just fix that up a bit. we go. A little bit bent, so let's just fix that. It's better to fix our pivot points now than cry later. Alright, that seems fine. Next. Pivot point for this is in a good place. As is that one. That's fine. That's... I think these two could probably be doing with moving down just a tiny bit. There we are. These ones can come down a bit. And these ones can come down a bit. If it's on local, you can move them all simultaneously, you see. Now, over here, let's go to our front viewport. I'm going to bring that to about there. That'll give us some swing for our shoulders. And there. Okay, and now these should all have sensibly placed pivots and things. I'll change this to view rather than local. So this means that I can now go and set our link hierarchies. Now, before we do, let's look at our guy, okay? Now, we can't just go top to bottom, drop it down, okay? For a start, when we walk, we don't hang from our heads with our feet dragging on the ground. So, pardon me, what we're going to do is we're going to link everything to the pelvis. Okay, so the legs are going to hang off the pelvis and be driven by the feet. The hands are going to hang off the ends of the fingers, and so on. Now, before we do anything else, we also need some stops. What you probably noticed when I used the bone tools briefly to create bones, okay? So here's me dragging out a long bone. When I click, right click, it places this node on the end. Why is that? Well, it's because when it comes to time to, grab this and do your IK history independent solver, you don't want to drag it to here. You want to drag it to this, which is the tip of the bone. And that way your animation's coming from the very end. Okay, you don't want to drag it from here because the pivot's here. This won't move. Just to kind of show you what I mean by that. Suddenly, you got this fixed thing on the end, yeah? So that's why we're doing it this way. So what we need to do now is create some end parts that are going to go on these, and these will be our rig ends, okay? So for this we're going to create a sphere, or maybe a geosphere. Let's have a look. So we can create a geosphere. I think that's probably going to be the best bet because we can just drag it off from there. See? So, let's have a look. I mean, you can create more than one segment if you want. These are not going to be renderable. The other option, of course, is just to create a standard sphere or even a box. However, having something that comes out from the center like this is useful. Tetra. Sorry, I like that. It's nice. So we're going to create an octa. So for each end part, click and drag like this. And that'll denote where the ends of every single limb are. Okay, so here, this is your big toes. Here, ends of your fingers. Okay. Now remember how we gave everything a useful name before? We're still going to have to do that. So, L thumb end. And this is a rig, so I better add the word rig to it, haven't we? That way we know what it is. Rig, L, finger 1, end. L, finger 2, end. L foot end. R foot end. R thumb end. R finger 1 end. R finger 2 end. Okay, so now these little pointy parts here all become parts of these fingers, which in turn become part of this thing here. We can check, make sure that everything's named, and it is. Okay, now it's time to create a layer for our rig. So if I just go up here to my layers tool, at the minute everything's in the default, where everything automatically gets created. What I'm going to do is make a new layer called bones. So create a new layer containing the selected objects. Right click, rename and call it bones. Don't bother hitting return, you just click out. Okay, now anything new because of this tick will be created in there, which we don't want. So let's create everything new in default. Alright, later on we're going to create stuff for our rig, and that'll go in an area called rig. You notice we haven't created the body yet at all. Not important. The body on this is simple. Everything about this really is the rig and the animation, everything that makes these things awesome, and the fact that there's loads of them. Right, time for the stretch. There we go, have a good stretch, stretch your legs out. Don't want to get a thrombosis while sitting at your desk, that wouldn't be nice. Alright, looking at this, we're going to save a workbench. It's important to have workbenches, that way if something goes hideously wrong, we'll be able to deal with it. And the reason for that is because we're going to look at these arms and things, and we're going to start linking things back. So just to quickly demonstrate, alright, we get our select and link. Click, drag, click, drag, click, drag, click, drag, right? So that comes all the way back to here, and now obviously if we take this and just bend it, everything else bends too. Reason this becomes so massively important though is because if I now go up to here, which is linked to this part, yeah, so we go up and down like that, I can now create my first rig, which would be a history independent solver, down to here. And this little superstar here is our first rig, see? Which allows us to bring this in. Capiche? I hope so. So that's how easy it is really to create our first part of rig. So what I'm going to do, unlink these again. You can tell they're unlinked because I can just, you know, take one piece and drag it off. So let's unlink that selection. There we are. Now what I'd like to do is move these parts so they're in alignment with the others. I'm not going to move the pivots, I'm just going to move the actual parts themselves. Like that, because I want them to be in alignment with whatever it is they're attached to. Toes, let's have a look at those, they're fine, they're fine. This one needs to be rotated. This one needs to be rotated. There we go. Okay, so we're about ready. So in the next part, we're going to start logically building our hierarchical links. Okay, so I'll see you in that part.